What if a box the size of your backpack could power your entire home forever? Imagine never paying an electricity bill again, never worrying about power cuts, and never depending on fuel, solar panels, or massive grids just to keep your lights on. It sounds impossible, like something straight out of science fiction, right? But it's happening right now, not in Silicon Valley, not in Europe, but in Africa. A tiny box has appeared in villages and towns across the continent, and it is quietly doing something the world said could never be done. It is powering homes, schools, clinics, and shops without fuel, without sun, and without any wires connecting to the national grid. Just plug it in, and your house comes alive with energy. Lights turn on, refrigerators hum, phones charge, water pumps run, and the darkness that once defined the nights of entire communities is gone in an instant. This isn't just a story about electricity. It's a story about freedom, about independence, and about a revolution that is beginning in one of the most unlikely places. This box, no bigger than a school backpack, is now powering 10,000 homes every single day in rural Africa. Families who once relied on candles, kerosene lamps, or dangerous diesel generators now live in houses filled with clean, safe, and free electricity. Children are studying at night with bright LED lights, their books illuminated as if they were in a modern city library. Clinics that once struggled to keep vaccines cold are now running fridges 24/7, saving lives that would have been lost to preventable diseases. Small shops that used to close at sunset now stay open late into the evening, their glowing lights becoming new centers of community life. For the first time in history, rural Africa is not waiting for the world to save it with electricity, it is powering itself with something entirely new. But how does this box work? How can something so small replace entire power stations, oil pipelines, and solar farms? And perhaps the biggest question of all, why is the world nervous about it? The secret lies in technology that challenges everything we thought we knew about energy. Unlike solar, it doesn't need sunlight. Unlike wind, it doesn't wait for the breeze. Unlike diesel, it doesn't drink gallons of expensive fuel. This box generates its own endless stream of electricity quietly, without emissions, without noise, and without maintenance. To the families using it, the explanation doesn't matter. All they know is that when they plug in their box, the lights come on and never go out. But to the global energy industry, this is terrifying. If a box can power a home forever, what happens to oil companies? What happens to electric utilities, to the trillions invested in batteries, grids, and fuel pipelines? And what happens to governments who control people through their access to electricity? This is why the story of the tiny African box is not just about technology, but about power in every sense of the word. Behind the scenes, pressure is already building. Big corporations are sending lobbyists to find out who is behind this invention. Offers are being made, billions of dollars in exchange for ownership of the technology. Whispers of intimidation are spreading, with some insiders claiming powerful interests don't want this invention to reach the global market too quickly. But here's where the story takes a shocking twist. The inventors behind this box refused. They turned down the billions. They said no to the corporations, no to the energy giants, and no to the politicians who wanted to control it. Instead, they made a decision that has never been seen before in Africa's history. They chose to keep the technology in Africa for Africa. For the first time, an invention that could change the entire world is being used first to empower African people rather than being exported to the West. This is a historic reversal of the old story where Africa gives and the world takes. Now Africa is saying no. No to selling its future. No to letting outsiders control its destiny. And yes to building its own future on its own terms. But the world has noticed. Elon Musk has been building Tesla batteries and solar grids for years, but even Tesla cannot compete with the box that runs itself. Oil barons who once thought Africa would always be dependent on imported fuel are realizing their grip is slipping. Governments in the West are quietly worried, asking if Africa can leapfrog the grid with this tiny box, what stops the rest of the world from doing the same? And the truth is, nothing stops it. If this spreads, everything we know about energy collapses overnight. Entire industries worth trillions could become irrelevant. The oil rigs, the pipelines, the coal mines, the nuclear plants, all of it could become history, like rotary phones in the age of the smartphone. And this isn't a dream of the future. It is already real, already here, already lighting up villages. Imagine. What happens when the first African city announces that every household is powered by self-running boxes? Imagine what happens when disaster zones cut off from the grid are powered instantly without waiting weeks for trucks of fuel or repair teams. Imagine what happens when you, sitting in your home, are told you will never pay another electricity bill again. That is the future this tiny box represents. But the fight to keep it alive is only beginning, because history has shown us that revolutionary technologies often face suppression before they see the light of day. Think of how clean cars were buried by oil companies. Think of how new energy inventions vanish into the vaults of corporations, never to be seen again. The difference this time is that Africa is holding on tightly, refusing to let go. And that decision has sent shockwaves across the world. Some call it reckless, some call it dangerous. But for the people living in those 10,000 homes, it is nothing short of a miracle. When the sun sets and their lights stay on, when their children read books under bright lamps, when their food stays cold in refrigerators powered all night, they don't care about global politics. They just know they finally have power. The kind of power that gives dignity, independence, and hope. And it all began with a box the size of a backpack. The question now is not whether it works. It does. The question is whether the world will allow it to spread, because the moment it spreads beyond Africa, the old system begins to crumble. The money flowing into oil pipelines dries up. The profits of power utilities shrink. The global balance of energy shifts. And that, more than anything else, is why the story of this box is one of the most important of our time. It is not just about electricity, it is about who controls the future. And right now, for the first time, Africa is holding the future in its hands. Tomorrow, it could be your home, your city, your country. The only question left is this: will the world allow it, or will they try to shut it down? To understand just how big this is, you have to picture life before the box arrived. In many rural villages across Africa, the sun was both a blessing and a curse. When it set, everything stopped. Shops closed, children could not study, and families huddled around smoky kerosene lamps just to see each other's faces. That smoke filled the air inside their homes, burning eyes, damaging lungs, and making even simple evenings dangerous. Fire accidents from candles and lamps were common, turning small huts into infernos in seconds. Generators were a luxury, noisy, expensive, and thirsty for fuel that cost more than what most families earned in a week. The result was an endless cycle of poverty. No power meant no progress. Children fell behind in school. Health clinics lost patients because they couldn't store vaccines or operate at night. Businesses stayed small because they couldn't expand beyond daylight hours. Darkness was more than the absence of light. It was the absence of opportunity. And then came the box. The day the first families plugged it in, it was like stepping into another world. One flick of a switch, and the night disappeared. Children screamed with joy, laughing as they saw their homes lit up for the first time like a city house. Mothers wept, watching refrigerators hum for the first time, knowing food could be stored safely. Fathers walked proudly into shops that could finally stay open, earning more money to care for their families. It was more than electricity. it was dignity, it was freedom. It was proof that Africa did not have to wait another century for development. The village of darkness became a village of light overnight. And soon, it wasn't just one village. Word spread quickly. Boxes began appearing in thousands of homes. 10,000 homes now run every single day on the energy from this invention. And that number is only the beginning. Every week, more units are delivered. Every week, more families cross the invisible line from powerless to empowered. But while the families celebrate, boardrooms in other parts of the world are filled with panic. In Europe and America, energy corporations are quietly running calculations. If this spreads, how many billions will they lose? How fast could their empires crumble? Imagine being an oil executive who has spent decades drilling in Africa, only to realize Africa may no longer need oil. Imagine being a power company planning billion-dollar grids, only to learn villages can leapfrog the grid entirely. Imagine being an investor in solar farms, only to find out a box can do more with none of the limitations. The panic is real, and it is growing. Lobbyists are moving quickly, whispering into the ears of governments, pushing for laws, restrictions, and excuses to slow the spread. Offers have been made behind closed doors, offers so big they sound unbelievable. But the inventors still said no. They looked at the billions and walked away, because for them, this was never about money. It was about Africa rising on its own. It was about giving light to villages that the world forgot. It was about proving that the continent long dismissed as poor could be the birthplace of the most important technology of the century. That act of refusal shook the global order. For the first time, Africa was not the seller, it was the keeper. And this has forced the world to pay attention in a way it never has before. Journalists are writing stories, scientists are demanding proof, corporations are plotting strategies. But in the villages of Africa, none of that matters. All that matters is that the lights are on. Children are studying, mothers are cooking safely, and life has changed forever. This is the quiet revolution that no one saw coming. And yet, history should have warned us. Every great leap forward comes from a place no one expects. The personal computer started in a garage, not a corporate lab. The smartphone rose out of innovations no one took seriously at first. And now the future of energy is rising from a continent the world underestimated. That is why this story matters so much, because it is not only about what is happening now, it is about what comes next. Imagine entire cities across Africa powered only by these boxes. Imagine skyscrapers lit up, factories running, schools buzzing with light, all without ever touching a grid or burning a drop of fuel. Imagine disaster zones hit by floods or earthquakes, receiving hundreds of boxes, instantly restoring power without waiting weeks for help. Imagine refugee camps transformed overnight into thriving mini-cities with reliable electricity. The possibilities are endless, and they extend far beyond Africa. If this spreads worldwide, every household could have its own power source. Every apartment building could generate energy independently. Every rural home in Asia, South America, or the Middle East could leapfrog decades of waiting. Even you, watching this video, could one day have your home powered by a box no bigger than your backpack. No bills, no outages, no dependence. But here lies the real conflict, because while people dream of this future, powerful players are already moving to stop it. History has shown us that disruptive inventions rarely spread without a fight. From the light bulb to the electric car, progress has always threatened the old powers, and the old powers always push back. They will call it a scam. They will say it's impossible. They will demand regulations that make it harder to use. They will try to bury it under red tape and lawsuits. They will do everything except admit the truth that their monopoly is ending. But here's the twist. This time, the people already know it works. 10,000 homes are living proof. 10,000 families will not go back to darkness. 10,000 voices are shouting to the world, this is real and it is changing our lives. That is why the story cannot be stopped, because once people taste freedom, they never let it go. And energy freedom is the greatest kind of freedom there is. Take the story of little Amina, a 12-year-old girl from a rural village in Kenya. For most of her childhood, evenings meant struggling to read by the dim flicker of a kerosene lamp. The smoke burned her eyes, and the fuel often ran out before she could finish her homework. Her dream was to become a doctor, but every night her studies were cut short by darkness. Then, one day, her family received the tiny box. That night, for the first time, Amina sat under bright white light, her books spread wide, her smile bigger than ever. Her parents watched as she read late into the evening, whispering that maybe, just maybe, their daughter's dream could come true. For Amina, this wasn't just electricity, it was the difference between hope and hopelessness. Now imagine that story repeated 10,000 times across the continent. In another village in Nigeria, a small clinic struggled to keep vaccines cool. Doctors had to rush doses to patients before the ice melted, and many children missed out on life-saving medicine. But with the tiny box, the clinic runs a refrigerator all day and night. Vaccines are stored safely, patients are treated in the evening, and the mortality rate has already dropped. The village no longer fears preventable diseases stealing their children. For them, the box is more valuable than gold. And then there's the story of Musa, a shopkeeper in Ghana. For years, his small corner store closed at sunset, losing hours of potential business. Now, with his shop glowing brightly into the night, customers flock in even after dark. Musa's income has doubled. He hired 2 workers, giving jobs to young men who once had nothing. The tiny box did not just power his lights, it powered his prosperity. These are the human faces of the revolution. This is why the box matters more than any statistic or technical explanation. It's not about watts and volts. It's about futures, dreams, and dignity. But as these lives improve, the shadows of resistance are growing darker. In boardrooms far away, conversations are being held behind closed doors. Powerful men in suits are asking, if people no longer need our power plants, what happens to our profits? What happens to our control? The answer terrifies them. Entire economies are built on the back of energy dependence. Nations wage wars to control oil. Banks finance trillion-dollar infrastructure tied to fossil fuels. Even politics revolves around promises of cheap electricity. If the box spreads, all of that collapses like a house of cards. No pipelines to protect, no grids to control, no bills to charge. Just free, independent power in every home. That is not just a technological revolution. It is a political earthquake. Think of the wars fought over oil. Now imagine a world where oil is no longer needed. Think of the protests over rising electricity prices. Now imagine a world where power is free. Think of governments using blackouts to control their people. Now imagine a world where no one can be switched off. The box is more than electricity, it is liberation. And that is why it is both celebrated and feared. But here is the twist most people don't see. The global fight against climate change desperately needs solutions like this. The world is racing to cut emissions, but progress is slow. Countries argue, industries resist, and carbon levels keep rising. Yet here in Africa, a device exists that could cut emissions to near zero while giving billions access to power. If every home in the world ran on boxes instead of coal or oil, climate change could be slowed in a way scientists have only dreamed of. And still, many of the same governments that speak loudly about the climate are quietly ignoring this technology. Why? Because saving the planet is one thing. Losing control is another. And this box represents the ultimate loss of control. But what if, instead of fighting it, the world embraced it? What if instead of suppression, there was support? Picture refugee camps in the Middle East, glowing brightly because every tent has its own box. Picture rural India, where millions still live without power, instantly transformed into thriving communities. Picture disaster zones in America, hit by hurricanes, where power is restored not in weeks, but in minutes with thousands of boxes distributed. The potential is endless. But will the world allow it? That is the question every viewer must ask themselves. Because history tells us the powerful rarely give up without a fight. They will try to buy it. They will try to bury it. They will try to convince the world it cannot work. But the proof is already there, glowing in 10,000 homes every night. And once people see the light, they will never return to darkness. This is why your voice matters. Because the more people who know about this, the harder it becomes to hide. The more people who demand it, the faster it will spread. This is not just Africa's story. It is humanity's story. It started with 10,000 homes. Tomorrow, it could be 1 million. And one day, it could be yours. The tiny box is real. The revolution is here. The only question is, will the world embrace it or try to shut it down? And that is where you come in. If you believe this technology deserves to spread, let your voice be heard. Like this video, comment your thoughts, share it with others. Because the fight for free power is not just happening in Africa, it is happening everywhere. And the louder we speak, the brighter the future becomes. A future where no child studies in darkness, a future where no clinic loses lives for lack of electricity, a future where no family is enslaved by power bills. It all begins with a box the size of a backpack. And it could change everything.